My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 17 years, I've served in Logistics Command for the U.S. Army. That means I'm the guy making sure people get what they need when it matters most. Whether it's fuel in Kandahar, blood plasma in Mosul, or a medevac chopper loaded and cleared before a sandstorm shuts the airstrip. Most folks never see the work we do, and that's kind of the point. If we're doing it right, everything flows, and nobody has to think about how it got there. I've never jumped out of a helicopter under fire or cleared buildings in Fallujah. I don't carry medals, and you won't find me in the stories generals like to tell over whiskey. But when a mission is hanging by a thread and someone's counting seconds, they call me. I've built routes in the middle of blackout zones and rerouted entire supply chains after typhoons. It's quiet work, thankless, most days, but it keeps the whole damn thing from falling apart. The funny part is, the people it protects the most are the ones who often forget it's even there. Like last month, during a briefing with CENTCOM leadership, there were probably 200 people in the room. PowerPoints, ribbons, all the ceremony you'd expect. A general I won't name leaned into the mic, pointed my way and said, "We'll have logistics support on standby, just in case." He paused, smiled, then added, "You know, the coffee runners." People laughed. Not all, but enough. I didn't laugh. I didn't even flinch. I just nodded like I was used to it because I am. That kind of thing doesn't hit like a slap. It sinks in like a stone in the stomach. I sat through the rest of that briefing, thinking about all the names I've written in red ink over the years, all the crates of antibiotics that saved lives by a whisper, all the missions that only finished because someone like me stayed up until 3 a.m., making sure one flat tire didn't become a fatality. This isn't a war story. Not the kind with bombs and glory. It's the kind where silence means success, and the only applause is when no one dies. But today I'm telling it anyway because maybe it's time someone did. The conference room felt more like a pressure cooker than a meeting space. Air recirculated without moving, coffee went cold in paper cups, and every seat was filled with officers too stiff in their dress blues. I sat near the side wall, binder open, 3 pens lined up by color, and every stat double-checked twice before breakfast. It was a quarterly readiness review, the kind of meeting that decides funding and futures. I'd pulled data from 8 bases, 12 supply chains, and 3 conflict zones. My charts were tight, numbers were real. No projections, no spin. I knew exactly what I was walking into and had spent 2 weeks making sure I wouldn't waste a single second. Then General Rourke walked in like he owned gravity. Big smile, big voice, and the kind of charisma that makes people want to follow you even when you're walking them into a wall. He nodded at a few folks, clapped someone's back, and then turned toward me. With a casual shrug, he said something like, "And this is Cross. He's logistics, keeps things moving, coffee runs, ammo counts, that kind of stuff." A couple officers chuckled. He moved on before I could respond. Like I was a utility closet with a face. I didn't blink, just closed my binder and folded my hands in my lap. Inside, something hollow cracked a little deeper. Not because it was the first time someone treated logistics like a back office task, but because this time, they did it in front of everyone. No one corrected him. Not the colonel I'd worked with during the blackout in Kuwait. Not the major whose medevac routes I rebuilt in 36 hours flat. I wasn't angry. I was something quieter, like a door closing softly from the inside. I kept my face still, let them talk, let the general smirk his way through introductions. And I just sat there, watching the room forget who held the map. I didn't say a word after the briefing. Just nodded, gathered my binder, and walked out with the rest of the staff like nothing had happened. No one looked at me. No one had to. I felt the weight settle in that space behind my ribs, where disappointment sits. Back at my desk, I opened a blank document and titled it, Memo of Record. Date, location, names present, summary of remarks. I kept it clean. No commentary. Just facts lined up like inventory. I'd done this before. Not to escalate, not to fight. just to make sure there was a record of what really happened when memory starts to soften around the edges. Some people talk to feel power. I write to keep the truth from drifting. That night, I stayed late, fingers quiet on the keys. Outside, the base lights buzzed like always. Inside, I was back in a tent in northern Syria, New Year's Eve 3 years ago. A medevac chain had gone dark. Helicopters stuck in the wrong grid, fog rolling in, and 4 Marines bleeding out with nowhere to land. Comms were breaking up. The forward base had no visual. I rerouted the convoy using coordinates that hadn't been updated in 3 weeks. Pulled a backup generator off a munitions truck. Reactivated a dormant pad under full blackout protocol. We saved every single one of them. Never made a headline. Never even got a thank you from command. But the next morning, the flight chief found me, nodded once, and said, "You kept that bird in the sky. That's all I ever needed." So, no, I didn't yell when Rourke called me a coffee runner, I wrote. I remembered, and I let the words speak later, when silence would mean complicity. Some men need applause. Others just want the mission to finish clean. I know which one I am. The first warning came in a text from a junior supply tech out at FOB Redstone. 1 sentence, no punctuation. Cargo stuck in Jordan. Medevac crates mislabeled non-essential. I stared at it for a second, then opened the ops log and saw the rest unraveling. A new colonel had taken over the planning desk 2 weeks earlier. Big on buzzwords, sharp suits, and slide decks with glowing charts. He decided logistics would run through central command to streamline efficiency. It looked great on paper, but in the real world, it meant no one was tracking the timing on perishable medical shipments. I wasn't looped into the planning. My credentials were flagged for review. They said my methods were outdated. I said nothing, just kept checking the dashboards on my personal system. That's when I saw the lag at the transit point in Aqaba. 37 pallets of trauma gear, blood plasma, and field ventilators rerouted to a depot marked low priority. I ran a silent trace. The depot had no cold chain. The manifest still listed blankets and rations. Someone had copied the wrong template. The shipment had less than 6 hours before spoilage. I pinged my contact at Base Logistics in Ramstein, told him what to flag, and requested an emergency diversion. He didn't ask questions, just trusted the tone in my voice. Next, I called the freight officer in Jordan. Told her the pallets were mistagged and needed ground transfer to Amman Airport, stat. While she rerouted crews, I sent the corrected manifest, flagged the serials, and looped in the Med Command leads. By the time anyone in DC noticed, the gear was already in the air. No one clapped. No one even knew how close we came. But the 82nd Med team in Kandahar got their supplies with 3 hours to spare. Later, someone sent an all-hands email praising quick thinking under pressure. They didn't name names. That was fine, because I knew who fixed it, and I knew who nearly let it fail. This wasn't about pride. It was about lives. About knowing that PowerPoint doesn't stop bleeding. People do. People who read the cargo codes and feel the hours ticking in their bones. That's the difference. That's what saved them. 2 days after the shipment landed, I got an encrypted message from a defense liaison out of the Pentagon. Short and plain. "Can you confirm the source of the reroute to Kandahar?" I replied with dates, times, contacts, and a line-by-line log. No opinions, just proof. An hour later, I got orders to report to D.C. No explanation, no itinerary. Just a seat on a military hop and a name to check in with on arrival. I packed my go bag slow, 3 changes of clothes, tablet, field notebook, and the backup drive I never leave without. My wife asked if something was wrong. I told her I didn't know yet. On the plane, I stared out the window and tried not to guess. A dozen scenarios ran through my head, none of them good. You don't get summoned to D.C. for fixing mistakes quietly. You get summoned when someone needs a name to blame or a lid to tighten. By the time we landed, the sun was setting behind the Potomac and the air smelled like jet fuel and autumn leaves. I moved quiet through Andrews, met my contact in a dark coat near the tarmac, and got into the back of a black SUV without asking questions. We didn't talk on the ride. At the hotel, I laid my clothes out on the bed like I always do. I checked my files twice. Then I sat by the window and watched the lights from the freeway roll past like tracer fire. My phone stayed silent. My breath stayed slow. I wasn't afraid, just braced. Because I've learned the hard way that when you fix something without making noise, the people in charge don't always say thank you. Sometimes they ask how you knew. Sometimes they ask why you didn't follow the chain of command. And sometimes they say nothing at all. So I waited. Alone, focused, calm. Ready for a reprimand, maybe even reassignment. What I wasn't ready for was what came next. The part that changed everything. The part that said, maybe silence isn't always invisible after all. The auditorium smelled like old carpet and pressed uniforms. Rows of brass and suits filled the seats. A sea of ribbons, stars, and silent glances. I sat near the back, shoulders square, not taking up more space than I needed. General Rourke took the stage like he was born to it. He gripped the podium like it owed him something and launched into a speech full of cadence and control. Words like honor, innovation, and future echoed off the walls, but didn't land. My name hadn't been called. I wasn't listed in the program. I figured I was here to listen, maybe take a quiet reprimand behind the curtain later. I kept my face still, eyes ahead, hands resting on my knees. I'd been invisible before. It wasn't new. Halfway through his speech, just as Rourke was building toward his closing line, a senior aide walked briskly across the stage. He leaned in and whispered something. Rourke's jaw twitched. Then he nodded once, sharp. The aide stepped forward to the mic. The room hushed. And then, my name was said. Not my rank. Not my title. Just my full name. Spoken clear. They asked me to come forward. For a second, no one moved. Then every head turned to look back. At me, I stood without hurrying. My shoes felt heavy but steady on the carpet. I didn't button my jacket. I didn't smile. I walked the aisle with the same pace I use in a crisis. Calm, exact, focused. The applause started late. Hesitant at first, then fuller, then quiet again when they saw my face. I wasn't proud in that moment. I wasn't angry either. I was ready. That's all. Ready to let them know I'd been here the whole time. On stage, a civilian official in a dark blue suit met me with an envelope and a handshake. The kind of handshake that means something. He turned to the microphone and said two things. That the operation saved lives, and that none of it would have happened if not for Daniel Cross. He didn't mention Rourke. Didn't need to. The general stood off to the side, expression unreadable, jaw tight. He didn't clap. He didn't move. I didn't look at him. The room was still. The kind of still that doesn't come from silence but from realization. People were starting to understand what they'd missed, who they'd overlooked. I didn't give a speech, just nodded once and stepped back. The official handed me a commendation sealed in gold foil. Not a medal, a letter, direct from the secretary. Recognition of service rendered without failure, of judgment under fire. I stepped down from the stage and returned to my seat. Not a hero's walk, just a man going back to where he'd always been. Doing the work no one else saw until it almost fell apart. As I sat, the aide leaned over and whispered that transportation had been arranged. The Pentagon wanted a debrief. I nodded. Of course they did. Now they wanted to understand how it worked. Around me, people started clapping again. This time it was different. Not loud, not showy, but real. Like respect being paid one note at a time. I didn't look back at the stage. I didn't need to. Justice, when it comes quiet and clean, doesn't need an audience. It just needs to land. And in that moment, it did. They gave me a command, not of soldiers, but of systems. A new logistics task force, one that reported directly to the Defense Operations Center, bypassing the usual layers of noise. They gave me freedom too, to pick the team, define the scope, build the culture. No ceremony, just a directive with my name on it and a secure room in a building with no signage. I started with 5 people, all sharp, all quiet professionals. A couple I'd worked with back in Kandahar, another from Germany, and one who used to fly in and out of conflict zones with only a tablet and a headset. The rest came later, but only the kind who cared more about uptime than applause. We didn't do logos or mission statements. We had a whiteboard, a map, and a server that didn't sleep. Our job was simple: keep the lifelines moving. Fuel, food, meds, spares, whatever the mission needed, before it was needed. Emails came in from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some congratulated me. Some asked to join. A few just said they remembered how I handled things. I replied to all of them. Not with long messages, just enough to say I saw them. We worked strange hours. The office didn't have dress code rules or flags on the wall. What we had was clarity. If something moved on time, we logged it. If it didn't, we fixed it. No memos. No drama. Just solutions. I never called it revenge. What would be the point? I'd already learned that the people who need credit the most are usually the ones doing the least. We just made sure things didn't break. Sometimes I'd sit at the end of the day with a mug of bad coffee, watch the screens dim down, and feel something quiet settle in. Not pride exactly. Something older, a kind of peace that comes from doing what's right when no one's watching. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about protecting what matters. The people on the ground, the teams in the air, the ones who needed gear to land where it had to land, on time and without excuse. That's the work. That's always been the work. And for me, that's enough.